Two people walk into the same room. Both are equally talented. Both have worked hard. Both want the same opportunity. One walks in carrying invisible noise. Every glance feels like a judgment. Every delay feels personal. Every disagreement feels like a threat. His mind races ahead before anyone else has finished speaking. When something doesn't go his way, his emotions arrive before his thinking does. The other person notices the same tension, hears the same criticism, faces the same uncertainty. But something is different. He doesn't rush. He doesn't need to prove himself in every conversation. He doesn't confuse movement with progress. While everyone else is reacting, he is observing. While others are trying to win the moment, he is quietly winning the future. At first, they appear almost identical. If anything, the calmer person may even seem slower, less exciting, less ambitious. But months pass. Then years. One becomes exhausted from constantly fighting fires he helped create. The other builds a life that looks strangely effortless from the outside. People begin trusting him with larger responsibilities. Relationships become more stable. Opportunities seem to appear around him. When conflicts arise, others naturally look toward him instead of away from him. It looks like luck. It isn't. It is the invisible return on emotional stability. Most people misunderstand calmness. They imagine it means having no emotions. It doesn't. Some believe calm people simply avoid confrontation. They don't. Others think calmness is something you're born with, a personality reserved for naturally relaxed people. That isn't true either. Calmness is not the absence of feeling. It is the refusal to let feelings become your commander. Every day, life quietly rewards this ability. The reward rarely arrives immediately. That is why so many people overlook it. The loud argument may seem to win today. The impulsive decision may feel satisfying today. The emotional outburst may appear powerful today. But life is not scored today. Life keeps score over hundreds of ordinary moments. The conversation where you stayed, composed instead of defensive. The mistake you admitted instead of hiding. The opportunity you waited for instead of forcing. The criticism you learned from instead of taking personally. The pressure you carried without passing it to everyone around you. These moments rarely make headlines. Yet they quietly determine who becomes respected, trusted, resilient, and genuinely successful. The people who always seem impossible to shake aren't protected from difficulty. They've simply learned something most people never practice. They've discovered that your greatest advantage isn't controlling the world around you. It's controlling what the world awakens inside you. That changes everything. Because once your emotions stop making your decisions for you, your decisions start changing your entire life. Throughout this audiobook, you'll discover why calmness is far more than a pleasant personality trait. You'll see how it shapes judgment, relationships, leadership, resilience, confidence, and long-term success, and why the people who appear quiet on the surface often possess the strongest psychological advantage in the room. If this audiobook helps you think differently, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share in the comments which idea stays with you the longest. Your support helps us create more long-form audiobooks like this. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1: The Hidden Advantage. Nobody notices. There is a strange paradox about calm people. They rarely appear to be winning while the game is still being played. In the middle of an argument, the loudest voice often seems the strongest. During a crisis, the busiest person appears the most productive. In competition, the person making bold moves attracts the most attention. Our brains are naturally drawn to visible action. We notice speed. We notice intensity. We notice confidence performed as volume. But the qualities that attract attention are not always the qualities that produce lasting results. Imagine watching two trees grow. One shoots upward almost overnight, after a season of heavy rain. The other grows slowly, almost too slowly to notice. Day after day, it seems unchanged. If you judged only by appearances, you would predict the first tree would dominate the forest. Years later, a powerful storm arrives. The fast-growing tree, with its shallow roots, bends until it finally breaks. The slower tree remains standing. Its real growth had been happening where no one could see. Human character develops in much the same way. Calmness builds roots, and roots are invisible until something tries to knock you down. Most people think success comes from doing extraordinary things once in a while. More often, it comes from refusing to do destructive things repeatedly. You don't always need a brilliant decision to move your life forward. Sometimes you simply need to avoid one terrible decision made in anger, one uncontrolled email, one impulsive resignation, one emotional purchase, one unnecessary argument, one relationship damaged by words spoken in frustration. Entire careers have changed because someone lost control for 5 minutes. Entire friendships have ended because someone wanted the last word. Entire businesses have collapsed because leaders reacted instead of thinking. These moments don't happen because people lack intelligence. They happen because emotion temporarily becomes stronger than judgment. Calm people are not immune to anger. They simply understand something others forget. An emotion is information. It is not instruction. Feeling angry tells you something matters. It does not automatically tell you what to do next. Feeling afraid tells you to pay attention. It does not automatically mean you should retreat. Feeling insulted tells you something touched your ego. It does not automatically mean the other person deserves a response. This distinction changes everything. Most people experience an emotion and immediately obey it. Calm people experience the same emotion but become curious about it before acting. That small pause looks insignificant. In reality, it separates two completely different lives. Think about someone you deeply respect, not someone who entertains you, not someone who dominates conversations. Someone whose judgment you genuinely trust. What qualities come to mind? Probably not impulsiveness. Probably not emotional unpredictability. You likely think of steadiness, reliability, consistency, composure. The interesting part is that these qualities don't merely earn admiration. They create opportunities. Imagine you own a company. A major client calls with terrible news. A shipment has failed. Money is being lost every minute. Customers are becoming angry. You have two managers. The first panics. He speaks rapidly. He blames coworkers. He changes his plan every 10 minutes. His emotional state spreads through the office like electricity. Everyone becomes anxious. Mistakes multiply. The second manager also recognizes the seriousness of the problem. But before speaking, he breathes. He asks questions. He gathers information. He decides what matters first. His calm doesn't erase the crisis. It prevents the crisis from multiplying. Who would you trust with greater responsibility next month? The answer feels obvious. Yet, many people spend years trying to appear impressive instead of becoming dependable. Dependability grows from emotional stability. This explains something fascinating about human psychology. Emotions are contagious. Walk into a room where everyone is laughing, and your mood begins to change. Walk into a room filled with panic, and your heartbeat often rises before you even know why. Scientists sometimes refer to this as emotional contagion. Our nervous systems constantly read the emotional states of other people. Without realizing it, we synchronize with those around us. This was useful for survival. If one member of an ancient tribe suddenly panicked, everyone else needed to become alert immediately. The problem is that modern life activates this ancient system almost constantly. One anxious coworker can influence an entire office. One angry customer can affect an entire team. One stressed parent can shape the atmosphere of an entire household. Calm people interrupt this chain reaction. Instead of absorbing every emotional wave around them, they become emotional anchors. When everyone else speeds up, they slow down. When everyone else raises their voice, they lower theirs. When everyone else jumps to conclusions, they gather facts. People often mistake this for confidence. In truth, confidence is frequently the result, not the cause, of calmness. Because once you've learned you don't have to obey every emotional impulse, uncertainty becomes less frightening. Criticism loses much of its power. Failure becomes information rather than identity. Pressure becomes manageable. You begin trusting yourself in situations that once overwhelmed you. This trust cannot be borrowed. It cannot be purchased. It is earned through countless small moments where you quietly prove to yourself that emotion would not become your master. There is another hidden advantage to calmness that people rarely discuss. Calm people conserve energy. Think about how exhausting emotional reactivity really is. Replaying conversations, imagining arguments, defending yourself against criticism that hasn't happened, reading hidden meanings into ordinary messages, worrying about every possible outcome. Each thought seems harmless by itself. Together, they become a constant tax on your attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Where your attention goes, your life follows. If most of it is spent managing unnecessary emotional storms, there is very little left for learning, creating, solving problems, or building meaningful relationships. Calmness is therefore not only emotional, it is economical. It wastes less mental energy. That saved energy quietly accumulates. It becomes deeper focus, better listening, more thoughtful decisions, greater creativity, healthier sleep, stronger relationships. From the outside, people call it wisdom. From the inside, it often begins with something much simpler, not reacting immediately. There is a saying in sailing that experienced captains do not control the wind. They control the sails. Life works the same way. You cannot prevent criticism. You cannot eliminate uncertainty. You cannot guarantee fairness. You cannot stop unexpected setbacks. But you can decide how much influence those events have over your next decision. That is where calm people quietly separate themselves from everyone else, not because their lives contain fewer storms, but because they stop allowing every storm to become part of themselves. At first, this difference is almost invisible. No applause follows the conversation you chose not to escalate. No award is given for the insult you ignored. No headline celebrates the impulse you resisted. These victories happen in silence, and that is exactly why they are so powerful. They are shaping someone you are becoming, even when no one else notices. Because the greatest transformations rarely begin with dramatic moments. They begin with invisible choices, repeated so consistently that one day the world mistakes them for talent. The hidden advantage of calmness has never been that it makes life easier. Its true advantage is that it allows you to remain fully yourself, even when life is doing everything it can to pull you away from who you want to be. Chapter 2. Why Emotion Makes Smart People. One of the greatest misconceptions about intelligence is that smart people naturally make smart decisions. Experience says otherwise. You have probably met someone who could solve complex problems at work, but repeatedly sabotaged their own relationships. Someone who understood finance, but made reckless purchases in moments of excitement. Someone who gave excellent advice to others, but failed to follow it when their own emotions were involved. Knowledge and judgment are not the same thing. Intelligence tells you what is true. Judgment determines what you actually do. And judgment is surprisingly fragile. Imagine trying to read a map while someone is constantly shaking your shoulders. The map hasn't changed, your ability to use it has. Strong emotions work in much the same way. When your mind becomes flooded with anger, fear, embarrassment, jealousy, or panic, your intelligence doesn't disappear. It simply becomes harder to access. This is why remarkably capable people sometimes make astonishingly poor decisions. Not because they stopped knowing better, because they temporarily stopped thinking clearly. Consider an experienced airline pilot. During routine flights, every movement is deliberate. Every procedure has been practiced thousands of times. Now imagine that an unexpected emergency occurs. The pilots who survive are rarely the ones with the fastest hands. They are the ones whose minds remain organized, while everyone else would be overwhelmed. Their calm allows their training to stay available. Panic closes the door to what they already know. Your brain behaves in a similar way. When you perceive danger, whether it is a physical threat or something as ordinary as harsh criticism, your nervous system prepares you for survival. Your heart beats faster, your breathing changes, stress hormones enter your bloodstream, attention narrows. This response was incredibly useful when human beings faced predators. If something was trying to eat you, stopping to analyze every possibility would have been a terrible strategy. Fast reactions saved lives. The challenge is that your brain often responds the same way to situations that are not actually life-threatening. A disagreement during a meeting, an unexpected bill, a critical message, someone ignoring your text, a social media comment. None of these require the survival instincts of our ancestors. Yet, your body often reacts as though they do. Once that survival mode begins, your thinking changes in subtle ways. You become more certain than you should be. You notice evidence that supports your emotional state while overlooking evidence that contradicts it. You interrupt more often. You listen less carefully. You assume intentions instead of asking questions. The world becomes smaller. Your options become fewer. Everything starts feeling urgent. Urgency is one of emotion's greatest illusions. Very few decisions actually need to be made immediately. Yet emotions constantly whisper the opposite. Reply now. Defend yourself now. Quit now. Spend now. Say something now. Win now. Those voices feel convincing because emotions are designed to prioritize immediate action. Calm people understand that urgency deserves examination before obedience. One of the simplest questions you can ask yourself is this: will this decision still seem necessary tomorrow morning? It is astonishing how many emotional decisions fail that test. Think about the last time you were extremely angry. Perhaps someone insulted you. Maybe a coworker took credit for your work. Perhaps a friend disappointed you. In that moment, your mind probably produced dozens of convincing arguments for immediate action. You imagined exactly what you wanted to say. You rehearsed the conversation. You pictured yourself proving the other person wrong. Hours later, or perhaps the next day, that certainty often faded. The facts had not changed. Your emotional state had. This is why time is one of the greatest allies of wisdom. Time doesn't magically solve every problem, but it allows emotions to settle enough for judgment to return. Calm people don't delay because they are indecisive. They delay because they understand that clarity often arrives after intensity leaves. There is another reason emotion causes intelligent people to lose. It creates tunnel vision. Imagine holding a flashlight in a dark forest. Wherever the beam points, that is all you can see. Everything outside the light disappears. Strong emotion acts like that flashlight. If you become embarrassed, you begin noticing every sign that other people are judging you. If you become jealous, you notice every detail that supports your insecurity. If you become afraid, every uncertain possibility begins to look like a likely disaster. Your attention becomes selective. The danger is that your conclusions begin feeling objective, even though they are being filtered by your emotional state. This explains why two people can experience the same event and reach completely different interpretations. One sees rejection. The other sees feedback. One sees failure. The other sees information. One sees an ending. The other sees a beginning. The event is identical. The emotional lens is different. Calmness widens that lens. It allows more possibilities to enter your awareness. Instead of asking, "How do I defend myself, Dad?" you begin asking, "What am I missing?" Instead of asking, "Who's to blame?" you ask, "What's actually happening?" These questions sound simple. In reality, they change everything, because the quality of your answers depends on the quality of your questions. Emotion usually asks questions that protect the ego. Calmness asks questions that reveal reality. History offers countless examples of this difference. Military leaders who charged into battle because pride demanded immediate action often suffered devastating defeats. Others appeared almost painfully patient. They waited. They gathered information. They resisted pressure from impatient advisors. Only when conditions favored success did they move. To observers, this sometimes looked like hesitation. Later, it looked like wisdom. The same pattern exists in everyday life. A manager who listens before responding often discovers that the apparent problem was only a symptom. A parent who pauses before reacting hears what their child was actually trying to communicate. A friend who waits before replying to an emotional message prevents a disagreement from becoming permanent. The victory rarely comes from having the perfect words. It comes from refusing to let temporary emotion make permanent decisions. There is a useful way to think about emotions. Imagine they are weather rather than identity. Rain passes, storms pass, fog lifts, even hurricanes eventually lose strength. You would never conclude that the sky has become rain forever, yet people often make that mistake with their minds. I am angry. I am anxious. I am hopeless. These feelings seem permanent while they are happening. But emotions, like weather, are constantly moving. Calm people recognize this. Instead of building their lives around temporary emotional climates, they wait for clearer skies before making important decisions. This doesn't mean ignoring feelings. Quite the opposite. Feelings deserve attention. They simply do not deserve unquestioned authority. There is a profound difference between listening to your emotions and surrendering to them. Listening allows emotion to provide information. Surrender allows emotion to become your leader. The first creates wisdom. The second creates regret. If you observe the people whose lives steadily improve over decades, you will notice something interesting. They are not emotionless. They laugh deeply. They grieve sincerely. They become frustrated. They celebrate. They feel the full range of human experience. The difference is that their emotions visit. They do not move in permanently. That is why intelligence finally has room to work. Not because they know more than everyone else, but because they have learned how to protect clear thinking when it matters most. And in a world where so many people are controlled by the emotion of the moment, that quiet ability becomes one of the rarest forms of strength. Chapter 3. The Long Game. That reactive people never play. Walk into any casino, and you'll notice something fascinating. Almost everyone is focused on the next hand, the next spin, the next roll. The excitement comes from immediate results. Every few seconds, someone wins. Every few seconds, someone loses. The emotional highs and lows arrive so quickly that they become addictive. Now compare that environment to someone planting an orchard. The person placing young trees into the ground knows something the gambler does not. Nothing important will happen today. Tomorrow won't look much different. Neither will next week. Yet, if the work continues consistently, years later, those quiet decisions will produce fruit season after season. Both people are making choices. Only one is thinking beyond the present moment. This difference reaches far beyond casinos and orchards. It quietly divides the way people live. Some people are constantly trying to win the next moment. Others are building lives that keep winning long after the moment has passed. Calm people almost always belong to the second group. That is because calmness naturally stretches your sense of time. When emotion takes over, the future becomes smaller. Your attention shrinks until today feels like everything. You want immediate relief, immediate validation, immediate revenge, immediate certainty. The future becomes something your emotions are willing to sacrifice in exchange for feeling better now. Think about how many costly decisions begin with one simple thought. I just need to feel better. So someone spends money they cannot afford. Someone ends a relationship during an argument they would have regretted 24 hours later. Someone abandons months of progress because today's discomfort feels unbearable. The decision makes perfect sense emotionally. It makes very little sense over the course of a year. This is why patience is often misunderstood. People imagine patience means waiting without doing anything. Real patience is different. It is continuing to make intelligent decisions while the rewards remain invisible. That requires calmness. Without calmness, patience becomes impossible because your emotions constantly demand evidence that your effort is working. Imagine two investors beginning with the same amount of money. The first checks the market every 15 minutes. Every small drop feels catastrophic. Every increase feels like genius. His emotions rise and fall with every movement. Soon he begins buying and selling constantly. He mistakes activity for progress. The second investor studies carefully, chooses wisely, and accepts that meaningful growth takes time. She still pays attention. She simply refuses to let temporary fluctuations dictate permanent decisions. Years later, their results often look completely different. Not because one was dramatically smarter, because one allowed short-term emotions to interfere with a long-term plan. Life operates by remarkably similar rules. Relationships improve slowly. Skills improve slowly. Health improves slowly. Trust grows slowly. Character grows slowly. Most valuable things develop at a pace that impatient emotions dislike. This creates an uncomfortable truth. The greatest rewards in life usually arrive too slowly for reactive people. Imagine learning a musical instrument. During the first week, improvement is difficult to notice. Even after a month, you may still feel clumsy. If your motivation depends entirely on immediate success, you will probably quit. But imagine practicing for 20 minutes every day for 5 years. The transformation becomes extraordinary. The person who stayed calm during the awkward beginning reaches a destination unavailable to the person who demanded instant mastery. The same principle explains why calm people often appear to become successful overnight. Observers usually notice only the visible result. They do not see the years of invisible consistency. The conversations where they chose listening over arguing, the mornings they worked while others searched for motivation, the evenings they rested instead of chasing unnecessary drama, the countless ordinary decisions that quietly accumulated. Success rarely arrives as one dramatic leap. More often, it arrives as interest compounded on thousands of calm choices. There is an old story about a craftsman building a stone bridge. Each day he places only a few stones. Travelers passing by laugh at the slow progress. It will never be finished, they say. The craftsman smiles and continues working. Years later, those same travelers cross the completed bridge without thinking about the patience that created it. Many of life's greatest achievements are like that bridge. People admire the finished structure while overlooking the calm persistence that made it possible. One reason reactive people struggle with the long game is that emotions distort the value of time. Psychologists sometimes describe this as present bias. The human mind naturally gives greater importance to immediate rewards than future ones. Receiving something today often feels more valuable than receiving something larger later. This bias helped our ancestors survive. Food available today was more certain than food that might appear tomorrow. But modern life often rewards the opposite approach. saving instead of spending, learning instead of entertaining yourself, exercising instead of remaining comfortable, building relationships instead of collecting attention. These choices ask you to trade immediate pleasure for future strength. Calmness makes that trade easier because it reduces the urgency of today's discomfort. You stop asking, "How do I escape this feeling?" and begin asking, "What kind of future is this decision creating?" That single question changes the direction of an entire life. Imagine a young employee entering a company. Every criticism feels personal. Every promotion given to someone else feels unfair. Every difficult assignment feels like punishment. If he reacts emotionally each time, he may leave job after job searching for immediate appreciation. Another employee sees the same challenges differently. Each difficult project becomes experience. Each criticism becomes information. Each year becomes another layer of skill. 5 years later, people call him fortunate. What they rarely recognize is that his greatest advantage was not intelligence. It was the willingness to keep investing when the returns were still invisible. This is why calm people rarely appear desperate. Desperation belongs to those who believe every opportunity is their last. Calm belongs to those who trust that good decisions continue creating opportunities. This confidence changes behavior. Instead of forcing conversations, they build genuine relationships. Instead of chasing recognition, they develop competence. Instead of trying to impress everyone immediately, they quietly become someone difficult to ignore over time. Ironically, this often earns them exactly the respect they were never trying to force. Nature offers endless reminders of this principle. Rivers do not carve through mountains because they are violent. They carve through mountains because they are persistent. Day after day, year after year, century after century, the rock appears stronger. Time proves otherwise. Calmness has the same quiet power. It rarely overwhelms obstacles in a single dramatic moment. Instead, it returns tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until what once seemed impossible gradually becomes inevitable. Perhaps this is why history remembers builders more than reactors. Empires were not created by one emotional speech. Great discoveries were not produced by one burst of excitement. Masterpieces were not painted in a single afternoon of inspiration. Enduring accomplishments came from people who understood that meaningful work unfolds over long stretches of time. They accepted the rhythm instead of fighting it. You can see this pattern even in your own life. Think back to the moments you were proudest of. Perhaps learning a profession, improving your health, repairing a relationship, developing confidence. None of these happened in one day. They emerged from many ordinary days linked together. The challenge is that ordinary days rarely feel extraordinary while you are living them. That is why reactive people underestimate them. Calm people do not. They understand that every quiet decision is casting a vote for the person they are becoming. No single vote determines the outcome. But thousands of them eventually do. And one day, what seemed like patience to everyone else becomes the very reason they call you successful. Not because you found a shortcut, but because you stayed committed long enough for invisible progress to become impossible to ignore. Chapter 4. Silence as Psychological Strength. The instinct to respond is one of the strongest forces inside the human mind. Someone criticizes you. You want to explain. Someone misunderstands your intentions. You want to correct them. Someone insults you. You want to answer immediately. The urge feels natural, almost irresistible. It tells you that if you don't speak now, you've already lost. But what if that feeling is wrong? What if the strongest move in many situations is not to respond faster, but to respond later, or sometimes not at all? Silence has an unusual reputation. People often mistake it for uncertainty, weakness, fear, a lack of confidence. Yet, throughout history, the individuals who carried the greatest authority were rarely the ones who filled every moment with words. A skilled judge listens longer than they speak. An experienced physician asks questions before offering conclusions. A wise negotiator often says less than everyone else in the room. Their silence is not empty. It is working. Most people think communication begins when someone starts talking. In reality, communication begins much earlier. It begins with attention. When you are preparing your reply while another person is still speaking, you are not truly listening. You are waiting for your turn. The difference may seem small. It changes everything. Imagine two friends having a difficult conversation. The first friend hears only enough to defend himself. Every sentence spoken by the other person is treated like an attack that requires an immediate response. The conversation becomes a competition. No one feels understood. No one leaves satisfied. The second friend listens differently. He allows the other person to finish. He notices not only the words, but also the emotion beneath them. Instead of asking, "How do I win this conversation?" he silently asks, "What is this person actually trying to tell me?" That question changes the direction of the entire discussion. Often, what people say is only the surface. Beneath anger may be disappointment. Beneath criticism may be fear. Beneath hostility may be insecurity. If you interrupt too quickly, you only hear the surface. Silence gives deeper truths enough time to appear. This is why calm people often seem unusually perceptive. They are not necessarily more intelligent. They simply gather more information before reaching conclusions. The world rewards this far more than most people realize. Think about a job interview. The interviewer asks a difficult question. One candidate answers immediately, filling every second with words. Another pauses for 3 or 4 seconds. He considers the question carefully. Then he answers. Those few seconds often communicate something powerful. They suggest thoughtfulness, self-control, confidence. The pause itself becomes part of the message. Many people fear silence because they assume others will judge it negatively. Yet, studies of conversation have shown that brief pauses are often interpreted as signs of careful thinking rather than incompetence. Of course, extremely long or uncomfortable silence can create confusion, but the short pause before speaking has a surprising effect. It tells people that your words are chosen rather than impulsive. There is another reason silence creates strength. It makes emotional manipulation much more difficult. Some people unconsciously depend on immediate reactions. They provoke, they criticize, they exaggerate. Not because they seek understanding, but because they seek control. Their influence depends on your emotional response. Imagine someone trying to start an argument. They make an insulting remark. They expect anger, or defensiveness, or panic. Instead, you simply look at them calmly. You say nothing for a moment. Suddenly, the emotional rhythm changes. The script they expected no longer works. Without realizing it, they begin reacting instead. Silence has shifted the balance. This does not mean silence should become passive aggression. The goal is not to punish people by refusing to speak. The goal is to ensure that when you do speak, your words belong to your judgment rather than your impulse. There is a famous observation often attributed to ancient philosophers. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Whether or not those exact words were ever spoken matters less than the wisdom behind them. Listening is not merely polite. It is strategic. Every sentence another person speaks is information you did not possess a moment ago. Every sentence you speak is information you already had. The person who listens well continuously learns. The person who only talks mostly repeats what they already know. This becomes especially important during conflict. Imagine 2 business partners disagreeing over a major decision. One interrupts constantly. He assumes he already understands the problem. The other remains quiet. He lets every concern emerge before offering his perspective. By the end of the discussion, he has something invaluable, a complete picture. His decision is not necessarily easier. It is simply better informed. Calm people understand something that reactive people often forget. The first version of a story is rarely the whole story. People speak emotionally before they speak accurately. When someone is frightened, they exaggerate danger. When someone is angry, they exaggerate blame. When someone is embarrassed, they exaggerate criticism. If you react to those first emotional expressions, you are responding to the storm rather than the landscape. Silence allows the weather to settle. Only then can you clearly see what is actually there. This principle also applies inwardly. Not every thought deserves immediate expression. Your mind produces thousands of thoughts every day. Some are insightful. Some are ridiculous. Some are temporary emotional echoes that disappear within minutes. If every thought became every spoken word, relationships would become impossible. Maturity is not thinking fewer thoughts. It is becoming more selective about which thoughts deserve a voice. Imagine your thoughts as visitors knocking on your door. Some bring wisdom. Others bring panic. Some bring resentment. Others bring curiosity. You do not have to invite every visitor inside. You can acknowledge them without allowing them to take over your home. Silence creates that space. It separates noticing a thought from acting upon it. The strongest people are rarely those who suppress emotion. They simply refuse to let every emotion become language. There is another quiet benefit to speaking less. Your words begin carrying more weight. Think of someone who constantly promises great things. Eventually, people stop listening. Now think of someone who rarely makes promises. But whenever they do, they follow through. Whose words carry greater value? Scarcity increases importance. The same principle applies to speech. When every opinion is expressed immediately, each opinion becomes lighter. When words are chosen carefully, they gain substance. This does not mean becoming silent all the time. Some situations require speaking clearly and firmly. Injustice should be challenged. Boundaries should be communicated. Truth should not remain hidden because silence feels comfortable. Calmness is not silence for its own sake. It is knowing when silence serves wisdom and when speech serves courage. That distinction is what gives calm people their unusual presence. People trust them because they know their reactions are not automatic. Every answer has passed through reflection first. Every decision has survived a moment of thought. Every important word has been weighed before being spoken. And in a world where so many conversations are driven by interruption, outrage, and the desperate need to be heard, that kind of silence becomes impossible to ignore. Because true silence is never the absence of strength. More often, it is strength choosing not to announce itself. Chapter 5. The space between feeling and action. Every meaningful change in your life begins in a place that almost nobody can see. It is not your goals. It is not your habits. It is not your morning routine. It is a moment so brief that most people never realize it exists. A feeling appears. Then, before action follows, there is a small space. For many people, that space hardly exists at all. The feeling becomes the action almost instantly. Someone criticizes them. They snap back. Someone ignores them. They assume the worst. A notification arrives. They reach for their phone without thinking. Stress appears. They seek distraction. Frustration appears. They complain. Loneliness appears. They scroll. The emotion arrives, and behavior follows as though connected by a wire. Life begins to feel automatic, not because people lack freedom, but because they never notice the moment where freedom actually lives. That hidden space between feeling and action is where calm people quietly change the direction of their lives. Imagine standing beside a river after heavy rain. The current is strong. Branches rush past. Leaves disappear downstream. If you accidentally step into the middle of that current, the water decides your direction. But imagine standing on the riverbank instead. You still see the current. You still hear its force. The river hasn't become weaker. You have simply stopped confusing yourself with it. Your emotions work in much the same way. Anger flows through you. Fear flows through you. Excitement flows through you. Disappointment flows through you. The question is not whether these emotional currents exist. The question is whether you immediately jump into them. Most people do. Calm people watch first. This is one of the quietest forms of strength. Because emotions are persuasive. When you are angry, anger insists that action cannot wait. When you are afraid, fear insists that danger is everywhere. When you are embarrassed, shame insists that everyone is watching. The emotion never presents itself as a suggestion. It presents itself as reality. That is why awareness matters so much. The instant you notice, I am feeling angry, something remarkable happens. There is suddenly an observer inside the experience. You are no longer only the emotion. You are also the person noticing the emotion. That distinction seems almost too simple to matter. Yet it changes everything. Imagine sitting in a movie theater. The film is intense. The music is loud. The characters are terrified. For a few moments, you become completely absorbed. Then someone beside you whispers, "It's only a movie." Nothing on the screen changes, but your relationship to it does. You still experience the story. You simply stop forgetting where you really are. Awareness does something similar with emotions. It reminds you that feelings are experiences you have. They are not identities you become. This ability has fascinated psychologists for decades. People who can notice their thoughts and feelings without instantly acting on them consistently show greater resilience, healthier relationships, and better decision-making under pressure. Not because they experience fewer emotions, because they create more distance from them. Distance is often misunderstood. It does not mean becoming cold, detached, emotionless. It means refusing to let one passing feeling speak for your entire future. Think about how many permanent decisions begin with temporary emotions. A resignation written after one terrible meeting. A friendship ended after one misunderstanding. Money spent to escape one stressful afternoon. Words spoken that cannot be taken back. The common thread is not the decision itself. It is the disappearance of the space between feeling and action. The emotion became the decision. Calm people protect that space. Sometimes it lasts only 10 seconds. Sometimes 10 minutes. Sometimes a day. The length matters less than the existence of the pause. There is an old technique used by experienced firefighters. When entering dangerous situations, they avoid rushing simply because everyone else is rushing. Instead, they deliberately slow certain movements, not because the emergency is unimportant, because panic creates mistakes. The fastest route to safety often begins by refusing to move blindly. Life presents emotional emergencies in much the same way. An unexpected accusation, a failed plan, a painful rejection, an embarrassing mistake. Everything inside you demands immediate action. Yet, the wisest response often begins with one quiet question. What actually needs to happen next? Not, what do I feel like doing? But, what will genuinely help? Those two questions rarely produce the same answer. One serves emotion, the other serves reality. There is another reason this hidden space matters. Every habit in your life passes through it. Consider someone trying to become healthier. Every afternoon, they crave sugary food. The craving appears automatically. They cannot stop that. What they can influence is what happens next. If they never notice the craving, habit takes over. If they notice it without judgment, something new becomes possible. They may still choose the same snack, or they may choose differently. Either way, awareness has interrupted automation. That interruption is the birthplace of change. The same pattern appears in every area of life: before checking your phone, before speaking in anger, before giving up, before avoiding difficult work, before buying something unnecessary. There is always a feeling. Then there is the space. Then there is the action. People often imagine discipline is the ability to force themselves into perfect behavior. More often, discipline begins much earlier. It begins by noticing what is happening before behavior starts. This is why calmness is not passive. It is highly active. It requires attention, presence, observation. Instead of being pulled through the day by emotional momentum, you begin participating consciously in your own decisions. This transforms ordinary moments. Traffic becomes an opportunity to practice patience. Criticism becomes information before it becomes offense. Waiting becomes reflection instead of irritation. Silence becomes comfortable instead of threatening. Gradually, your life begins to slow, not in productivity but in perception. You notice details other people rush past. You hear what was actually said instead of what you expected to hear. You recognize emotional patterns before they become emotional habits. It feels as though life itself has become clearer. In truth, your awareness has become quieter. There is an ancient story about an archer whose students admired his perfect aim. They believed his secret lived in his hands. He smiled and replied that the arrow was decided long before it ever left the bow. The shot was only the final expression of everything that came before it. Human behavior follows the same principle. Your actions rarely begin at the moment people see them. They begin in the invisible space where feeling meets choice. Strength is built there. Wisdom is built there. Character is built there. The world usually notices only the arrow. But your future is shaped by the quiet moment before you release it. Each time you refuse to let the first emotion become the first action, you widen that invisible space just a little more. And with every small widening, your freedom grows. Not because life becomes easier, but because your reactions slowly stop belonging to circumstance and begin belonging to you. That is the quiet power calm people carry with them wherever they go. It is not that they feel less. It is that they choose more. Chapter 6. When other people's chaos stops controlling you. One of the most liberating moments in life is not when the world becomes calmer. It is when other people's storms stop becoming your storms. Most of us spend years believing that our emotional state is created by the people around us. If they appreciate us, we feel valuable. If they criticize us, we feel diminished. If they remain kind, we feel secure. If they become unpredictable, our peace disappears with them. Without realizing it, we hand the keys to our inner world to whoever happens to be standing nearest. The problem is not that other people affect us. They always will. The problem is believing they should decide how we think, feel, and behave. Imagine living in a house where every neighbor owns a remote control for your lights. Whenever someone has a bad day, your lights flicker. Whenever someone becomes angry, your electricity fails. Whenever someone feels jealous, your entire home goes dark. You would never willingly live in such a house. Yet, many people live this way emotionally. A stranger's comment ruins their afternoon. A coworker's frustration destroys their concentration. A family member's anxiety becomes their own. A friend's disappointment lingers for days. Little by little, other people's emotional weather begins determining the climate inside their own mind. Calm people eventually realize something different. Empathy does not require emotional surrender. You can understand someone's pain without becoming consumed by it. You can care deeply without carrying everything. You can remain compassionate without losing yourself. This distinction is one of the most important forms of emotional maturity because emotional chaos is contagious. Walk into a room where everyone is laughing and you often begin smiling before you know why. Walk into a room filled with panic and your breathing changes almost immediately. Human beings naturally synchronize with one another. Thousands of years ago, this helped our ancestors survive. If everyone in your tribe suddenly started running, stopping to ask questions would have been dangerous. Today, however, this same instinct often works against us. One anxious meeting creates an anxious office. One frustrated customer affects an entire team. One angry parent changes the atmosphere of a household. One pessimistic friend slowly reshapes every conversation. The emotion spreads, not because anyone intended it, because nervous systems quietly influence one another. This is why your environment matters. But there is an important difference between influence and control. Influence is inevitable. Control is optional. Think about the people who seem impossible to provoke. Perhaps you know someone like this. No matter how tense the situation becomes, they rarely absorb the emotional energy around them. They listen. They respond thoughtfully. They remain respectful. They do not become cold or detached. They simply refuse to let another person's emotional state become their own operating system. This ability often looks mysterious. In reality, it comes from a simple shift in perspective. They stop asking, "Why is this person making me feel this way?" and begin asking, "What is happening inside this person that is causing this behavior?" That question changes everything. Imagine a customer shouting at a cashier. The obvious conclusion is that the customer is simply rude. Sometimes that is true, but perhaps they received devastating news an hour earlier. Perhaps they have not slept for 2 nights. Perhaps they are carrying pressures no one else can see. None of this excuses poor behavior. But it changes how you interpret it. Instead of seeing the shouting as a verdict about your worth, you begin seeing it as evidence of their struggle. That subtle shift protects your peace, because not every emotional outburst is actually about you. In fact, many are not. People often project outward what they cannot regulate inward. Someone insecure may criticize constantly. Someone fearful may try to control everyone around them. Someone ashamed may become defensive over the smallest mistake. Someone overwhelmed may snap at the nearest person. If you accept every reaction as a personal evaluation of yourself, life becomes unbearably heavy. Calm people learn to separate information from projection. Not every accusation is truth. Not every compliment is truth either. Both may reveal as much about the speaker as they do about you. Imagine standing in front of a mirror covered with colored paint. If the mirror reflects your face in red, would you assume your skin had suddenly changed? Of course not. You would recognize that the mirror itself has been altered. Human perception works similarly. Everyone sees the world through the colors of their own experiences, fears, hopes, disappointments, and expectations. When people react strongly to you, they are often responding not only to who you are, but also to the lens through which they see reality. Remembering this creates extraordinary emotional freedom. It allows you to listen without absorbing everything. There is another challenge many people face. They believe helping others requires carrying their emotional burden. Imagine walking beside someone carrying a heavy backpack. Compassion means encouraging them, supporting them, perhaps even helping them lift it for a while. But imagine trying to carry every backpack you encounter. Eventually, you would collapse under the combined weight. Many kind people live exactly this way. They feel responsible for everyone's happiness, everyone's disappointment, everyone's stress, everyone's expectations. The result is exhaustion. Not because they care too much, because they have forgotten where their responsibility ends. Healthy boundaries are often misunderstood. People imagine boundaries are walls that keep everyone out. In reality, healthy boundaries are more like fences with gates. They allow connection, but they also protect what belongs inside. You can say, "I understand why you're upset," without saying, "I will become upset too." You can say, "I care about your problem," without saying, "Your problem is now my identity." This distinction allows love to remain sustainable. Otherwise, every relationship eventually becomes overwhelming. Consider the example of an emergency room physician. Every day, they encounter fear, grief, uncertainty, and loss. If they absorbed every emotion exactly as their patients experienced it, they would soon become incapable of helping anyone. Instead, they develop compassionate steadiness. They remain deeply human. They simply refuse to let emotion overwhelm judgment. That calm is not distance. It is service. The same principle applies in ordinary life. Parents, teachers, managers, friends, partners. The calmer person often becomes the stabilizing force for everyone else. Not because they solve every problem, because they do not add unnecessary emotional weight to situations already heavy enough. There is another form of chaos that deserves attention. The chaos created by constant comparison. Someone else receives recognition. You feel behind. Someone else buys a new house. You question your progress. Someone else appears happier online. You begin doubting your own life. Without realizing it, you allow strangers to influence your emotional state every single day. Comparison quietly hands your peace to people who do not even know your name. Calm people gradually understand that another person's success is not evidence of their own failure. Life is not a single race where only one person reaches the finish line. It is millions of separate journeys unfolding at different speeds. The oak tree does not compete with the river. The mountain does not compare itself to the sea. Nature wastes no energy trying to become something else. Human beings often spend years doing exactly that. The moment you stop measuring your worth against everyone around you, an extraordinary amount of mental energy becomes available. Energy that can finally be invested in your own growth, your own relationships, your own purpose. Perhaps this is the quiet secret behind emotionally calm people. They have stopped expecting the world to provide the stability they have chosen to build within themselves. People will still disappoint them. Life will still surprise them. Conflict will still appear. But these experiences no longer dictate the condition of their inner world. Their peace is no longer rented from other people. It is owned. And once you reach that point, something remarkable happens. You become the person others instinctively seek when life becomes difficult. Not because you always have the perfect answer, but because your calm reminds them that storms eventually pass, and that someone who remains steady inside one can help others find solid ground again. Chapter 7. The reputation built by consistency. There is a form of influence that announces itself loudly. It comes with impressive speeches, bold promises, grand gestures. It attracts attention almost immediately. Then there is another kind of influence, quieter, slower, harder to notice while it is being built. It does not depend on charisma. It does not require perfect words. It grows through something far less exciting, consistency. And over time, consistency becomes reputation. Reputation is one of the few things in life that other people build for you. You can introduce yourself however you like. You can describe yourself as disciplined, trustworthy, patient, or dependable. But eventually, people stop listening to your description. They begin watching your patterns. Patterns tell the truth. Imagine you have two neighbors. The first is incredibly friendly. Every time you meet him, he enthusiastically offers help. If you ever need anything, just ask. Yet, when the moment comes, he is difficult to reach. He forgets. He cancels. He apologizes sincerely. Then, the same thing happens again. The second neighbor speaks very little. He never makes dramatic promises. But whenever you ask for help, he quietly arrives. No excuses, no performance, just reliability. After a year, whom do you trust more? Almost everyone chooses the second person, not because he said the right things, because he repeatedly became the same person. Trust is built through predictability. This is something calm people understand almost instinctively. Their emotional steadiness creates behavioral steadiness. Because they are not constantly controlled by whatever mood they happen to be in, other people begin to experience them as dependable. Today they are respectful. Tomorrow they are respectful. Next month, they are still respectful. Even under pressure, they remain recognizable. That familiarity creates safety. Human beings naturally relax around people whose behavior is consistent. You never have to wonder, which version of them will I meet today? Will they be supportive? Will they be angry? Will they ignore me? Will they overreact? Emotional unpredictability forces everyone around you to stay alert. It is exhausting. Imagine working for two different managers. The first manager's mood changes constantly. One morning, he praises your work. That afternoon, he criticizes the exact same effort. Some days he laughs. Other days, the smallest mistake creates an explosion. Soon, the entire team begins spending more energy reading his emotions than doing their jobs. Productivity quietly disappears. Now imagine another manager. She is not emotionless. She celebrates success. She addresses mistakes. She has difficult conversations when necessary. But her standards remain stable. Her reactions remain measured. Employees know where they stand. Mistakes become opportunities to improve instead of reasons to panic. The atmosphere changes completely. The interesting part is that neither manager necessarily possesses more technical skill. The difference is emotional consistency. Leadership often depends less on brilliance than stability. People do not merely follow intelligence. They follow reliability. This principle extends far beyond leadership. It shapes friendships, families, marriages, communities. Think about your closest relationships. Chances are they were not built through extraordinary moments alone. They were built through countless ordinary ones. Phone calls returned, promises kept, conversations remembered, kindness repeated, support offered without being asked. These actions rarely seem remarkable individually. Together they become character made visible. There is a saying that character is who you are when no one is watching. There is truth in that. But reputation is who people discover you are because they have watched long enough. The two eventually become connected. One reason consistency creates such powerful influence is that the human brain constantly searches for patterns. From childhood onward, we learn by predicting. If touching fire causes pain once, we remember. If someone repeatedly behaves with honesty, we begin expecting honesty. If someone repeatedly lies, we begin expecting deception. Prediction creates confidence. Confidence creates trust. Trust creates opportunity. This explains why emotionally reactive people often struggle even when they possess extraordinary talent. Their abilities may be exceptional. But if their reactions remain unpredictable, others hesitate. Clients become cautious, friends become uncertain, employers become reluctant, not because the person lacks skill, because inconsistency introduces risk. Calmness quietly removes that risk. Imagine hiring a pilot. Would you choose someone who flies brilliantly most of the time but occasionally panics during turbulence? Or someone whose performance remains steady regardless of conditions? The answer feels obvious because transportation depends on reliability. Yet every relationship operates according to similar principles. People trust those whose behavior remains steady under pressure. Pressure reveals patterns more clearly than comfort ever can. Anyone can appear patient when life is easy. Anyone can appear generous when resources are abundant. Anyone can appear kind when everyone agrees. Difficulty tells a different story. Stress reveals emotional habits that comfort keeps hidden. This is why calm people often earn respect slowly. During ordinary days, their steadiness may seem unremarkable, but when challenges appear, everyone suddenly notices. The person who stayed composed during conflict, the colleague who solved problems instead of spreading panic, the friend who remained present while everyone else disappeared, the family member who quietly carried responsibility without demanding recognition. These moments become unforgettable, not because they are dramatic, because they reveal who someone truly is. There is another aspect of consistency that many people overlook. It changes the way you see yourself. Every promise you keep to yourself strengthens self-trust. Every promise you repeatedly break weakens it. Imagine deciding to wake up early every morning. The first morning, you succeed. The second morning, you succeed again. A week passes, then a month. Gradually, something deeper than the habit begins changing. You stop saying, "I hope I'll do it." Instead, you begin thinking, "I know I will." Confidence grows, not from positive thinking, from accumulated evidence. Self-confidence is often misunderstood as a feeling. In reality, it is frequently a conclusion. It is your mind reviewing your own history and deciding whether you can be trusted. Calm people strengthen this inner relationship because they rely less on emotional motivation and more on quiet consistency. They understand that motivation rises and falls. Commitment does not have to. This changes how they approach difficult days. When they feel inspired, they continue. When they feel uninspired, they continue. When they feel uncertain, they continue. Not perfectly, but consistently. The world often celebrates dramatic transformations. The person who suddenly loses weight, the entrepreneur whose company becomes successful overnight, the athlete who wins a championship. Yet hidden beneath every visible breakthrough are hundreds of ordinary decisions no one applauded. The workout completed without motivation, the conversation handled with patience, the promise quietly honored, the temptation resisted. These moments never become headlines. They become reputation. Nature offers another reminder. A lighthouse does not earn trust because it shines brilliantly one night. It earns trust because sailors know it will still be shining tomorrow, and the next night, and the night after that. Its reliability becomes more valuable than its brightness. People work the same way. Others may initially admire charisma. They stay because of consistency. Eventually, they begin seeking your opinion, trusting your judgment, depending on your presence. Not because you demanded influence. Because your steady actions quietly earned it. Perhaps that is why calm people often seem respected without trying to appear impressive. They understand that reputation is not something you manufacture through image. It is something you cultivate through repeated behavior, one calm conversation at a time, one kept promise at a time, one thoughtful decision at a time. Over months and years, those ordinary moments become something extraordinary. People stop describing you by what you say. They begin describing you by what they have repeatedly experienced. And there are few compliments more meaningful than this. "I know what kind of person you are." Because those words are not built on a single impressive moment. They are built on consistency, and consistency is calmness made visible. Chapter 8. Calm doesn't mean weak. One of the greatest misunderstandings about calmness is that people confuse it with surrender. They assume that if someone remains composed during conflict, they must be afraid. If someone doesn't argue, they must have nothing to say. If someone chooses silence, they must lack confidence. This misunderstanding has existed for centuries. Many people mistake noise for strength because noise is easy to notice. Strength often isn't. Imagine walking through a forest during a storm. The smallest branches shake violently. Leaves fly through the air. Twigs snap in every direction. Everything seems alive with movement. Now look at the oldest tree in the forest. Its trunk hardly moves at all. The strongest thing in the forest often appears to be the calmest. Human beings are remarkably similar. The people with the least emotional stability often produce the most visible reactions. They interrupt. They raise their voices. They demand immediate attention. From a distance, this can look like confidence. But volume and confidence are not the same thing. A person who truly trusts themselves rarely feels the need to convince everyone else. There is an important question worth asking whenever you witness anger or aggression. What is this person protecting? Sometimes the answer is obvious. Other times, it is hidden beneath years of insecurity. Many emotional outbursts are not displays of power. They are attempts to escape vulnerability. Imagine someone who cannot tolerate being wrong. The moment another person points out a mistake, they become defensive. They explain. They blame. They change the subject. Perhaps they even attack the other person's character. To an observer, this may appear dominant. But look more closely. Their emotions are controlling them. A single criticism has determined their behavior. Who, then, is truly in control? The person shouting, or the person who can hear criticism without losing themselves? Real strength is measured by what controls you. If another person's opinion instantly changes your emotional state, then your emotions are being directed from the outside. Calm people gradually reclaim that authority. They still care about feedback. They simply refuse to become prisoners of every opinion they encounter. There is a difference between openness and fragility. An open mind can receive criticism without collapsing. A fragile ego cannot. This is why calmness often looks unusual. It combines qualities that many people assume cannot exist together. Gentleness with firmness. Kindness with boundaries. Patience with decisiveness. Humility with confidence. These combinations confuse people because they are accustomed to extremes. They imagine that a person must either dominate or submit, fight or retreat, control or surrender. Life is rarely that simple. Consider the example of an experienced martial artist. A beginner often believes every challenge must be answered immediately. Every movement demands another movement. Every strike demands another strike. The experienced practitioner behaves differently. They conserve energy. They wait. They observe. When they finally move, the action is deliberate rather than emotional. The goal was never to prove strength. The goal was to use it wisely. This principle extends far beyond physical conflict. Think about an argument between coworkers. One person interrupts repeatedly, determined to win every point. The other listens. When they finally speak, they choose one clear idea instead of 10 emotional reactions. Who appears stronger after the conversation ends? Perhaps not in the first minute, but almost always in memory. People remember composure long after they forget raised voices. One reason calmness is mistaken for weakness is that our culture often celebrates immediate reaction. News spreads instantly. Opinions are expected immediately. Social media rewards speed more than reflection. The fastest response receives attention. The most thoughtful response often arrives later when the audience has already moved on. This creates pressure. Pressure to speak before understanding. Pressure to judge before learning. Pressure to react before thinking. Calm people quietly resist this pressure. Not because they are slow thinkers, because they know that speed and wisdom are different qualities. Imagine a surgeon preparing for a difficult operation. Would you want them to rush because everyone outside the operating room feels anxious? Of course not. Their calm is not delaying the solution. It is protecting it. The same is true for almost every important decision. The more significant the consequences, the more valuable calmness becomes. There is another misconception worth examining. Many people believe kindness means allowing others to cross your boundaries. They confuse compassion with compliance. But healthy calmness is not passive. It knows how to say no. It knows how to walk away. It knows how to end conversations that have become destructive. The difference is that these actions come from clarity rather than revenge. Imagine someone repeatedly speaks to you with disrespect. One response is explosive anger. Another is silent resentment that lasts for years. A third response is calm firmness. This conversation isn't respectful. I'm going to leave now, and we can continue when we're both ready to speak differently. Notice what is absent. No shouting, no insults, no dramatic exit. The boundary is still clear. In fact, it is often clearer because emotion has not blurred the message. Boundaries built on calmness tend to last longer than boundaries built on anger. Anger burns brightly, then fades. Calm conviction remains. History repeatedly demonstrates this principle. Some of the most influential leaders were not remembered because they were the loudest people in the room. They were remembered because they remained steady, while others became consumed by fear, panic, or hatred. Their calm gave others confidence. People naturally follow those who make them feel more stable, not more anxious. This is true inside families as well. Imagine a child who accidentally breaks something valuable. If every mistake is met with shouting, the child learns fear. If every mistake is ignored, the child learns irresponsibility. But if the parent remains calm, explains the consequences, and helps the child make things right, something far more valuable develops. The child learns accountability without humiliation. Calmness teaches. Rage intimidates. The lesson lasts longer when dignity is preserved. There is also a quiet confidence that grows from no longer needing to prove yourself. Think about how much energy people spend trying to appear strong. They exaggerate achievements. They hide uncertainty. They refuse help. They fear admitting mistakes. All of these behaviors share one hidden belief. If people see my imperfections, they will think less of me. Calm people eventually discover something surprising. Admitting a mistake rarely destroys credibility. Trying desperately to hide it often does. Authenticity creates trust because it signals security. Only someone comfortable with themselves can acknowledge weakness without believing it defines them. That is why genuine confidence often sounds quieter than insecurity. Insecurity says, I have to convince everyone. Confidence says, I don't. This does not mean calm people never defend themselves. They do. But they choose their battles carefully. They ask a question many reactive people never consider. Will this matter a year from now? If the answer is no, they often let it go. Not because they are weak, because they understand that attention is limited. Every unnecessary conflict consumes energy that could have been invested elsewhere. The strongest people are not those who fight every battle. They are those who recognize which battles are worthy of their strength. Perhaps this is the greatest misunderstanding of all. People assume calmness removes power. In reality, it concentrates it. Instead of scattering your energy across dozens of emotional reactions each day, you preserve it for the moments that truly matter. Your words become more deliberate. Your actions become more purposeful. Your presence becomes more reassuring. And over time, others begin to notice something difficult to describe. You cannot easily be pushed. You cannot easily be provoked. You cannot easily be manipulated. Not because you have become harder, but because you have become steadier. Like the oldest tree in the forest, you may not attract attention with constant movement. Yet, when the storms arrive, and they always do, it becomes obvious where real strength was growing all along. Chapter 9. Becoming difficult to manipulate. There is a question that almost nobody asks before making an important decision. It is not, Is this the right choice? Or what will happen next? The more important question is this: whose emotions are influencing this decision? That question has the power to change your life, because manipulation rarely begins with force. It begins with emotion. Someone makes you feel guilty. Someone makes you feel afraid. Someone makes you feel ashamed. Someone makes you feel as though you are about to lose something valuable. And before you have time to think, they present a solution. Agree now. Buy now. Apologize now. Decide now. The emotion comes first. The request comes second. Most manipulation follows this exact pattern. Imagine a fisherman. He does not jump into the lake and chase every fish individually. He understands something much more efficient. If he controls the bait, he influences the movement. Human beings are remarkably similar. Many people are not trying to control your actions directly. They are trying to control the emotions that produce your actions. That is why calmness is such a powerful form of protection. You become difficult to influence because your emotions stop responding automatically. You begin noticing the bait before biting it. Think about the last advertisement that genuinely caught your attention. It probably did not begin with facts. It likely began with a feeling. Perhaps it suggested that everyone else was moving ahead while you were falling behind. Perhaps it hinted that time was running out. Perhaps it implied that without this product, you would miss an opportunity that might never return. Only after creating emotion did it explain the product itself. This is not necessarily dishonest. Emotion is part of communication, but it demonstrates an important truth. People rarely make decisions based purely on logic. Feelings often open the door before reasoning walks through it. The same principle appears in everyday relationships. Imagine someone saying, "If you really cared about me, you would do this." At first glance, it sounds reasonable. But pause for a moment. Notice what has happened. Instead of discussing the request itself, the conversation has shifted toward your identity. Now you are no longer deciding whether the request makes sense. You are defending whether you are a caring person. The emotional pressure quietly replaces thoughtful evaluation. Calm people notice this shift. Rather than reacting immediately, they gently return to the original issue. I do care about you. Let's still talk about whether this is the right decision. That simple response separates love from pressure. It allows compassion without surrendering judgment. Another common form of manipulation is urgency. You have to decide right now. This is your last chance. If you wait, everything will be ruined. Sometimes urgency is genuine. A fire requires immediate action. A medical emergency cannot be postponed. But many forms of urgency are manufactured. Why? Because urgency reduces reflection. The less time you spend thinking, the more likely emotion will make the decision. Imagine buying a house. Would you feel comfortable signing every document within 30 seconds? Probably not. The size of the decision naturally demands time. Now ask yourself why some of the most emotionally significant decisions in life are often made far more quickly. Ending relationships, accepting jobs, making major purchases, sending messages that cannot be taken back. Emotion constantly whispers, now. Wisdom often whispers, look again. Calmness gives wisdom enough time to be heard. There is another emotional button that manipulators often press, the desire for approval. Human beings are deeply social. For thousands of years, belonging meant survival. Being rejected by your group could have deadly consequences. That ancient instinct still lives inside you. It explains why criticism can hurt more than logic suggests, why embarrassment feels physically uncomfortable, why many people continue saying yes long after they wanted to say no. They are protecting belonging, not making decisions. Imagine someone who agrees with every opinion in every room. With one group, they criticize ambition. With another group, they praise ambition. Around one friend, they pretend to enjoy certain hobbies. Around another, they become someone entirely different. At first, this flexibility appears harmless. Over time, something painful happens. They no longer know who they actually are. Their personality becomes a mirror reflecting whoever happens to be nearby. Calm people slowly escape this trap, not because they stop caring about others, because they stop requiring universal approval. They understand an uncomfortable truth. If your peace depends on everyone liking you, your peace belongs to everyone except you. This realization is both frightening and liberating. Frightening because acceptance feels valuable, liberating because it reminds you that self-respect cannot be outsourced. One of the clearest signs of emotional freedom is the ability to disappoint people respectfully. Notice the wording, not carelessly, not cruelly, respectfully. Imagine a coworker asks you to take on extra work that you genuinely cannot manage. One response is resentment, hidden behind a forced smile. Another is an angry refusal. A calmer response sounds different. I appreciate you asking, but I can't give this the attention it deserves. No apology for existing. No unnecessary explanation. No emotional drama, just clarity. People who manipulate others often struggle with this kind of response because there is nothing emotional to grab onto. The conversation stays grounded in reality, not guilt. Not fear, not obligation, reality. There is another subtle form of manipulation that deserves attention. Comparison. Perhaps someone says, everyone else is already doing this. Or, no successful person would hesitate. These statements are powerful because they awaken insecurity. Suddenly, the decision is no longer about your values. It becomes about avoiding the feeling of being left behind. But calm people remember something important. Popularity has never been reliable evidence of wisdom. History is filled with moments when the majority confidently moved in the wrong direction. The desire to belong is understandable. The courage to think independently is invaluable. This is why emotionally steady people often appear surprisingly difficult to pressure. Not because they enjoy disagreement, because they have learned to separate external pressure from internal conviction. Their decisions still involve emotion. They simply refuse to let emotion become the only voice in the room. Think about a mountain standing through changing seasons. Winter arrives, the mountain remains. Spring arrives, the mountain remains. Storms pass, the mountain remains. The weather changes constantly. Its foundation does not. Calmness builds a similar foundation inside the mind. Opinions change. Trends change. Praise changes. Criticism changes. Your values remain. This stability creates a remarkable kind of freedom. You stop chasing every new opinion. You stop defending yourself against every misunderstanding. You stop needing immediate reassurance. Instead, you become guided by principles rather than pressure. That does not make life easier. People may still disagree with you. Some may misunderstand your intentions. Others may even become frustrated because you are no longer as easy to influence as before. But something more valuable replaces that comfort: self-respect. Because every time you pause before reacting, every time you examine emotion before obeying it, every time you choose clarity over pressure, you strengthen a quiet confidence that cannot be borrowed from anyone else. Eventually, people notice something they cannot quite explain. You are polite, but difficult to manipulate, compassionate, but not easily controlled, open-minded, but not easily persuaded by fear. And that combination is rare, not because it requires extraordinary intelligence, but because it requires something far less common: a mind calm enough to decide for itself. Chapter 10. training a mind that doesn't rush. There is a belief that keeps many people from becoming calmer. It sounds reasonable. It even sounds honest. This is just how I am. I've always been impatient. I've always had a short temper. I've always been anxious. These statements feel like descriptions, but over time, they become permissions. The more often you tell yourself that your reactions are fixed, the less likely you are to question them. Imagine someone standing beside a piano. They press a few random keys. The music sounds clumsy. They shrug and say, "I guess I just wasn't born musical." It would seem absurd. No one expects mastery after a few minutes of practice. Yet, many people expect emotional mastery without any practice at all. They hope calmness will appear naturally one day. When it doesn't, they conclude it must belong only to certain personalities. But calmness is much closer to a skill than a personality trait. And like every meaningful skill, it grows through repetition. Not dramatic repetition, ordinary repetition. Imagine watching a blacksmith shape a piece of steel. He does not strike the metal once and expect it to become a sword. He heats it, strikes it, cools it, repeats the process. Again and again. Each individual strike seems insignificant. Together they reshape the metal completely. Your mind changes in much the same way. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you remain patient during inconvenience, every time you notice your emotions without obeying them, you are making another quiet strike. No single moment transforms you. The repetition does. This is why calm people are not created during peaceful moments. They are created during ordinary frustrations, standing in a long line, waiting in traffic, receiving an unexpected criticism, dealing with a delayed plan, listening to someone who speaks slowly. These moments appear trivial. In reality, they are daily training sessions. Most people treat them as interruptions. Calm people treat them as practice. Imagine two people stuck in exactly the same traffic jam. The first spends the next 30 minutes becoming increasingly angry. He complains. He honks. He checks the clock every few seconds. His body behaves as though anger might somehow move the cars ahead. The second person notices the same frustration. But after recognizing that the situation cannot be changed immediately, he shifts his attention. Perhaps he listens to something meaningful. Perhaps he simply observes his own impatience without feeding it. Neither person reaches home sooner. But one arrives mentally exhausted. The other does not. This is one of the hidden truths about calmness. It is often less about changing circumstances than changing participation. You stop cooperating with unnecessary suffering. There is another exercise that calm people practice, often without realizing it. They deliberately slow small actions, not because slowness itself is valuable, because rushing has become unconscious. Think about how often you reach for your phone before you even notice boredom, how quickly you interrupt silence with noise, how automatically you respond to messages, how often you eat while thinking about something else. Modern life rewards speed, but speed easily becomes a habit that spreads into every corner of your mind. When every activity becomes automatic, awareness quietly disappears. Try imagining something different. Tomorrow morning, drink your first glass of water without looking at your phone. Notice the temperature. Notice your breathing. Notice how quickly your mind tries to move to the next task. Nothing extraordinary happens. Yet something subtle begins changing. You remember that your attention belongs to you, not to every impulse demanding it. This may sound insignificant, but attention is where calmness begins. You cannot regulate what you never notice. One reason people feel mentally overwhelmed is that their attention has become fragmented. A message appears. They check it. Halfway through reading, another notification arrives. They switch again. Then remember an unfinished task. Then open a different application. Then return to the first one. By the end of the hour, their body has remained in one chair while their mind has traveled through dozens of unfinished experiences. No wonder it feels restless. Imagine trying to have a conversation with someone who walks away every 15 seconds. You would struggle to connect. Your own mind deserves better attention than that. Calm people train focus, not because productivity is everything, but because scattered attention produces scattered emotions. A steady mind begins with sustained attention. There is another habit that deserves quiet respect: rest. Not entertainment, not distraction, rest. These are not the same thing. Many people finish a stressful day by immediately reaching for more stimulation: videos, news, scrolling, arguments online. The body becomes physically still while the mind continues sprinting. Hours later, they wonder why peace feels impossible. True rest is different. It allows the nervous system to recognize that the danger is past. Sometimes that means sitting outside without music, walking without headphones, reading slowly, watching the evening sky, breathing deeply without trying to accomplish anything. These moments feel unproductive, yet they are repairing something productivity alone cannot restore: your nervous system. There is a reason athletes schedule recovery between intense training sessions. Without recovery, performance eventually declines. The human mind follows the same principle. Constant stimulation eventually produces constant tension. Recovery is not laziness, it is maintenance. Calm people understand another important truth. You become what you repeatedly consume, not only food, conversations, ideas, media, environments. Imagine spending every evening surrounded by outrage, arguments, fear, conflict, mockery. Even if you never participate, your nervous system absorbs the atmosphere. Now imagine regularly exposing yourself to thoughtful conversations, meaningful books, quiet reflection, and people who solve problems instead of creating them. Gradually, your emotional baseline changes. Just as healthy food slowly changes the body, healthy attention slowly changes the mind. This does not happen overnight. Neither does physical fitness. No one enters a gym expecting visible transformation after one workout. The same patience belongs in emotional development. Every calm response strengthens pathways that become easier to follow next time. Every thoughtful pause makes the next pause more natural. Every unnecessary reaction you resist weakens the habit of reacting automatically. Months later, people may ask, "How did you become so calm?" They imagine a secret technique, a perfect philosophy, a single life-changing moment. The answer is usually much simpler. You practiced quietly, repeatedly, when no one was watching. Perhaps the greatest exercise of all is learning to become comfortable with unfinished moments. Not every question receives an immediate answer. Not every goal arrives on schedule. Not every misunderstanding is resolved today. Life contains uncertainty, whether you welcome it or not. Reactive people fight uncertainty constantly. Calm people learn to live alongside it. Instead of demanding guarantees, they build resilience. Instead of controlling every outcome, they strengthen their response to whatever comes. This shift changes everything, because peace built upon certainty collapses whenever certainty disappears. Peace built upon adaptability travels with you. Think again of the blacksmith. After hundreds of patient strikes, the steel has become something entirely different. The transformation seems sudden only to those who never watched the process. Human character develops in exactly the same way. One patient conversation, one resisted impulse, one quiet morning, one thoughtful decision, one ordinary day after another, until eventually you notice something remarkable. Situations that once controlled you no longer do. The criticism still arrives, but it no longer owns your afternoon. The delay still happens, But it no longer ruins your mood. The disagreement still appears, but it no longer steals your peace. Not because the world became calmer, because you did. And that is how a mind learns not to rush, not through extraordinary moments of inspiration, but through thousands of ordinary moments of practice, until calmness is no longer something you remember to do. It simply becomes the way you meet the world. Chapter 11. Why calm wins slowly, then, all at once. There is a moment that surprises almost everyone who has committed themselves to becoming calmer. For a long time, it feels as though nothing is changing. You still encounter difficult people. You still experience disappointment. You still become frustrated. You still have days when your emotions feel louder than your wisdom. It is tempting to believe that all your effort has produced very little. Then something happens. A situation appears that would have completely overwhelmed the person you used to be. Someone insults you. A plan falls apart. A relationship ends. An opportunity disappears. And instead of reacting the way you always have, you pause. You breathe. You think. You respond instead of exploding? Only afterward do you realize something remarkable. You have changed. Not because the moment felt dramatic, but because it no longer felt impossible. This is how calmness usually reveals itself. Not through constant awareness of progress, through unexpected evidence that your old habits no longer own you. Growth often follows a pattern that nature understands well. Imagine watching bamboo grow. For years, very little seems to happen above the ground. Someone passing by might conclude that the seeds failed. But beneath the surface, an enormous network of roots is quietly expanding. Then, in what seems like an impossibly short period of time, the bamboo rises with astonishing speed. People who see only the final stage call it sudden growth. Those who understand the process know it was years in the making. Human development follows the same rhythm. Your calm conversations, your patient decisions, your restrained reactions, your willingness to pause before acting. Each one is a root, invisible, easy to overlook. Yet together they create a foundation strong enough to support a completely different life. This explains why calm people often seem naturally wise. What others call natural is frequently practiced. What appears effortless is often the result of years of invisible repetition. There is another reason calmness seems to win all at once. The world responds to consistency with delay. Imagine meeting someone for the first time. If they are kind today, you appreciate it. If they are kind again tomorrow, you notice. If they remain kind for months, even during stressful situations, you begin trusting them. Trust is not created in a single interaction. It accumulates. The same is true of respect, opportunity, influence, leadership. People rarely hand these things to someone after one impressive performance. They wait. They observe. They ask themselves, can this person be relied upon when circumstances become difficult? Calm people answer that question repeatedly without realizing it. Every measured response becomes another piece of evidence. Eventually, the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. A manager begins assigning them larger responsibilities. Friends seek their advice during difficult seasons. Family members trust their judgment. Colleagues rely on their presence when pressure increases. From the outside, these opportunities appear to arrive suddenly. From the inside, they are simply the harvest of seeds planted long ago. There is a lesson hidden in nearly every meaningful achievement. Progress is rarely linear. You do not improve by 1% every single day in a perfectly visible way. Some days feel effortless. Others feel discouraging. Weeks pass where nothing seems different. Then a breakthrough arrives. Not because change suddenly began, because enough invisible progress finally became visible. Think about learning to read as a child. At first, every letter feels separate. Every word requires effort. Every sentence demands concentration. Then, one day, without noticing exactly when it happened, reading becomes automatic. The letters did not suddenly become easier. Your mind quietly reorganized itself through practice. Calmness develops in exactly this way. At first, every pause feels deliberate. Every patient response requires effort. Every emotional challenge feels like a test. Later, calmness becomes less of a strategy and more of a character trait. You no longer have to remind yourself to breathe before speaking. You simply do. There is another quiet reward that arrives after enough practice: freedom from emotional debt. Many people spend enormous amounts of energy recovering from their own reactions, apologizing for words spoken in anger, repairing relationships damaged by impatience, replacing opportunities lost through impulsive decisions, explaining actions they wish they had never taken. This recovery consumes time that could have been spent building something meaningful. Calm people still make mistakes. Everyone does. But they create fewer emotional emergencies that require repair. Their energy becomes available for growth instead of recovery. Imagine two hikers beginning the same journey. One carries only what is necessary. The other insists on carrying rocks collected along the trail. At first, the difference seems small. A few extra pounds hardly matter. Hour after hour, however, fatigue begins to accumulate. Eventually, the second hiker struggles under a burden that never needed to exist. Uncontrolled reactions are much like those unnecessary rocks. Each one seems manageable by itself. Together, they become exhausting. Calmness is not merely about feeling peaceful. It is about refusing to carry unnecessary weight. As the years pass, this difference becomes extraordinary. The calm person is not stronger because life gave them easier circumstances. They are stronger because they conserved energy that others continually spent on avoidable emotional battles. There is a beautiful irony here. Most reactive people chase immediate victories, winning arguments, getting even, proving themselves right, receiving instant recognition. Calm people often appear to lose these small battles. They walk away from arguments. They ignore insults. They wait instead of forcing outcomes. Observers sometimes mistake this for weakness. Time tells a different story. Months later, the relationship they protected still exists. Years later, the reputation they quietly built opens doors that emotion never could. Decades later, the habits they patiently developed become a life that others admire. They did not win every moment. They won the direction of their lives. That is a much greater victory. There is an old image of a river meeting a mountain. At first, the mountain appears immovable. The river seems insignificant. Day after day, the water continues flowing. It does not become angry. It does not demand immediate results. It simply continues. Eventually, valleys appear. Stone gives way. Landscapes change, not through force, through persistence. Calmness works in the same quiet manner. It rarely overwhelms obstacles in a single dramatic act. Instead, it shapes your life through thousands of consistent decisions that seem almost invisible while they are happening. Then one day, someone who has not seen you in years notices something different. You seem more confident, more patient, more grounded, more difficult to shake. They wonder what happened. You may struggle to answer, because there was never one defining moment. Only ordinary days live differently. That is the secret hidden inside every lasting transformation. The greatest changes in life often arrive so gradually that you cannot feel them while they are happening. Yet, when you look back, the distance becomes undeniable. And perhaps that is why calm people always seem to win in the end. Not because they avoid hardship, not because life favors them, but because while others were chasing quick victories, they were quietly becoming the kind of person who could sustain success long after the excitement had faded. The world notices them late, but it remembers them for a very long time. Outro: when this audiobook began, It asked you to consider two people standing in the same situation. Both faced pressure. Both experienced uncertainty. Both wanted success. The difference was never talent alone. It was how they responded when life refused to go according to plan. Now you've seen that calmness is not about becoming emotionless. It is not pretending that disappointment doesn't hurt. It is not remaining silent because you're afraid to speak. And it certainly isn't about letting people walk over you. Calmness is something far more powerful. It is the ability to remain the author of your own actions, even when your emotions are asking for immediate control. Throughout these chapters, you've seen how this ability quietly changes every part of life. You discovered that calmness creates an advantage long before anyone notices it. You saw how intense emotions can temporarily disconnect intelligent people from their best judgment. You explored why patient people often build extraordinary lives, while others exhaust themselves chasing immediate victories. You learned that silence can be an expression of confidence rather than uncertainty, that the small space between feeling and action is where freedom truly lives, and that other people's emotional storms do not have to become your own. You saw how consistency quietly becomes reputation, how real strength often appears calm instead of loud, how emotional steadiness makes manipulation far less effective, and how a peaceful mind is not inherited. It is trained one ordinary moment at a time. Finally, you discovered why calmness rarely delivers dramatic victories overnight. Instead, it changes the direction of your life so gradually that one day you wake up and realize you are no longer the person who once reacted to everything. That is how lasting transformation usually happens, not in one extraordinary decision, but through hundreds of ordinary ones. Perhaps tomorrow, nothing around you will look different. The traffic will still exist. People will still misunderstand you. Plans will still change. Someone may still criticize you. Life will continue presenting uncertainty because uncertainty is part of being alive. But something can be different. You. The next time frustration appears, perhaps you'll notice it before obeying it. The next time someone tries to provoke you, perhaps you'll remember that your peace doesn't have to be negotiated with every opinion you hear. The next time impatience whispers that everything must happen immediately, perhaps you'll recognize that the strongest things in life are almost always built slowly. That is the quiet promise of calmness. It doesn't remove life's challenges. It changes the person who meets them. And when the person changes, every challenge begins to look different. Years from now, people may describe you with words like steady, dependable, wise, resilient, or trustworthy. They will see the calm. They may never see the thousands of invisible choices that created it. But you will. Because you will remember that every moment you chose, reflection over reaction, patience over impulse, clarity over chaos, you were quietly building the life they now admire. If you enjoyed this audiobook and found value in it, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support allows us to continue creating thoughtful audiobooks that help people build stronger minds and calmer lives. And as you leave this audiobook, remember one simple truth. Life doesn't always reward the fastest response. More often, it rewards the clearest mind. The people who seem to win in the end are rarely those who controlled every circumstance. They are the ones who learned to quietly master themselves. That is a victory no setback can permanently take away.